Here we're looking at a new user. He is a part-time producer. He wants to pass this ranch down to his son, looking for it to be a multi-generational operation. So we're considering a few different things. What could be done? We look at like three main changes. We consider a potential acquired stocker operation using thin cull cows that he thinks he can feed out. He has a feedlot. We also look at evaluating virtual fencing. We also look at improving some really fairly low reproductive numbers and some low-level things that we can do for that. One would be low-level supplemental feeding of those replacement heifers, also breeding those first calf heifers a month early. And we also look at maybe implementing some hybrid vigor into the herd. All in all, he uncovers a plan where he can acquire well over a 200% increase in annual profit for the next 5 years. So now I see your direct costs. You weren't able to put any numbers in there yet.
I've got some numbers here in front of me. I figured I got a list here of numbers and kind of, you tell me what we need to plug in.
Well, all cash costs for your breeding animals.
I mean, it's running the ranch. I mean, so I don't know if that's going to.
Yeah, go ahead and look at that help there. So here we have kind of the different types of direct costs. Direct costs or variable costs are those that vary with production level. So the more cattle, the more of these costs. So it'd be like feed costs, grazing costs, veterinary costs, shipping costs, vaccine, those types of things.
Okay, so it makes sense. Okay.
Go ahead and tell me what you got. I just want to get some of this in here real quick, and then we'll go from there. Just to have a
feed cost of $11,798.
Okay. What else?
Should I put fuel in there also, or no? Or is that?
No, that'd be an overhead.
An overhead. Okay. Some freight and hauling, $903.
What else?
I got $478.78 for vet stuff.
So that's a total of $26,718. And go to the breeding report, and then year one total is how many? 156. So that's $171 a head. So put it in cash direct costs. And again, you can clean this up if you find more stuff. And then also your non-cash cost. So you're renting from your ranch, you're grazing your own property.
Yes, sir.
That cost, we want to keep track of that. So your grazing unit months are 1,341. I just looked it up. USDA, New Mexico grazing unit months is 1,650. That's kind of the going rate for private grazing unit months. So that's 26,000 divided by how many of those did we have in the breeding animals again? That's $141.83. Non-cash direct cost. Okay.
Is that $16.50 per animal or grazing unit?
Yes, sir. That's the New Mexico going rate according to the USDA report right now for private grazing.
So how would you break that down per acre? How would that?
Well, it don't matter. Really, what matters is how much utility you get off the grass. So, an acre of alfalfa is way different than an acre of sagebrush.
Right.
What really matters is the utility that you're getting, and that's the net energy of the grass you're consuming. Okay. Ranch Vision calculates how much you're needing to do that. And so that's the carrying capacity. Basically, you're renting your grazing ground from yourself.
Yes, sir.
So that's an additional enterprise. You're not getting paid cash. It's a non-cash enterprise.
Right.
Okay, so that money that you're paying yourself for grazing, go back to the direct cost, 26,000. Take that number and put that in a different enterprise. This is your own ranch grazing.
Okay.
You're getting that money there. Okay. And put that up in the notes. Enterprise number one is ranch grazing. It's $1,650 per grazing unit month times total grazing unit months, just to keep track of things, right? It's kind of going in one pocket, coming from the other, but we want to
like this. Okay.
So now we got those costs in. Just a couple other things before we get going. Look at the forecast. You put the cattle market maybe going down 4% and inflation at 4%. And opportunity interest rate at 9%. Those are somewhat pessimistic numbers, but you can put in whatever you like, just whatever you want, right? You could, because it's up to you. You're the guy that is going to be impacted. So you're the one that needs to make that decision, and you can play with it too. You can put in a number and then change it and see what that would look like. The opportunity interest rate though at 9%, that's pretty high. Generally, that is like what you can get in an alternative safe investment. And I think expecting to get 9% is kind of high.
Yeah, I was thinking if you had to go borrow money, I guess is where I was looking at that. If you had to go right to the bank. I misunderstood the question there. Okay.
So just save that now.
Okay.
I also want to look at your statistics. Are these pretty accurate? That's what you've been seeing, like for your H2s, 80% conception. Those are the tough ones to breed.
Yes.
Percent and then wean percent. That means those that were pregnant, like at preg check time, who actually do wean a calf. So that means you'd lose from pregnancy to weaning 2 out of 10 calves. That sound right? Or that's a pretty low number. Those that are pregnant at preg check time, they ought to wean a calf, but not always. Sometimes,
Right.
they might thwart or they might lose that calf at some point before weaning, but typically it's more in the 95, 97%. But, let's just leave it there for the moment.
Okay.
And, that breed back is pretty low too. And the H1 pregnancy percentage is also kind of low. But let's just leave that for now. I might have some suggestions if that's your number. And again, you make these decisions. I'll give you some advice or thoughts, but I'm not living where you're at. I'm not seeing what you're doing. So ultimately, the buck stops kind of with you because you're the guy on the ground and you know the real situation there. So let's go pull up some reports. Just look at the cattle breeding herd. That's staying pretty even number. But look at how much we're keeping for replacements. You had to keep 81% of your heifers back.
Right.
That means 81% of your heifer calves that you wean, you're keeping to breed back just to keep your numbers steady. Now, a lot of that is because of the pregnancy percent in those H2s and the low wean percent. Look at management. See, right now we're saying our open H2s and dry H2, we're selling 100% of those. So in other words, we're losing 20% of our replacement heifers because they get open, and we're losing another 20% because they don't wean a calf. So that means 40%, 2 out of 5 of our replacement heifers are just kind of getting called out because of those poor reproductive numbers. And if you bring up the replacement heifer cost,
I know they're expensive. They're not cheap. That's for dang sure.
No. And so, so your cost to raise them with those numbers right now is over $2,000 a piece, and you're losing 2 out of 5. They're just going down the road, and you've invested all that time and money in getting them to be cows, right? So you're losing a lot there. So if we can change those numbers, and I'm going to maybe have some suggestions for doing that, you'll see a big difference.
Sure. That's what we're after. I mean, we keep making changes and tweaks.
Let's look at the gross margins. So the way we have it, we were talking about keeping thin cows, right? Buying them in January, feeding them,
right,
and keeping them out. So the different enterprises, our cow-calf enterprise right now is returning a gross margin of almost $100,000, and that acquired stocker, and those are those thin cows that you're going to keep and sell. I think you had 6 of them, right?
Right.
And in year one, 10,882. Now that's only from 6 cows. Right. Let's look at enterprise efficiency, and you can see those are pretty darn high in terms of grazing because you're not grazing them so much, right? You're really feeding them,
right?
Those cows, you're feeding them out, and we put a lot of supplemental feed, so they're using very little grass from forage. Let's look at profit and loss. So 132 and 92. That's going to be our baseline. The drop in profit is mainly related to, we're saying there's a 4% drop in the market coming every year.
Right.
And there's also 4% inflation. That's a lot of why it's falling, because your herd numbers are staying the same.
Right.
But it's, we're kind of a bit of a pessimistic view, but that's okay. It's better to be conservative. Let's look at the cattle gross margins. So you're making $10,882. That's at the cost we identified, $1,800 processing or everything. That's for 6 animals. You're making almost $1,800 per animal.
Okay.
For those cows. If those things are true, that's pretty darn good return.
Yes, sir.
So let's think about that. Can you carry more? Could you? Yes. Probably the main question is, can you move more? Because you don't have to just have your own thin cows, but you could also purchase thin cows.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't cost you much more time and effort to feed 12 cows versus 6 cows, right?
Yes,
so can you carry more? Can you move more? Just for our purposes, let's say instead of doing 6, what if you did 18?
Okay.
Or 20 per year. Say 20, kind of a reasonable number. Okay, now let's look at change in annual profit. That went up to $157,000. That's an increase of 25,000 a year
Yes, sir.
on that. And what about in year 5? 105,000. Okay. The reason it didn't go up as high is because we're saying, hey, our costs are going up and and the market's going down. Okay. So that's almost a 20% increase in profit just doing that. I wanted to look at a couple other things. Go back to those reproductive numbers. Like we said, those are pretty low. If you could increase those, that's going to make a huge difference.
Yes,
so
sir.
Just a couple things to consider. If you were to feed those heifers a little more, you should have better conception rates. So mainly they need energy, a little bit of grain. And the earlier you start, the better. A smaller amount for a longer period of time is way better than a lot at the end. So
Yes,
if you were to feed 2 pounds a day, even for 6 months, that should significantly increase your H1 pregnancy percentage from 90, probably closer to 95. That's a very common number, 90 to 95.
Okay.
Also, it should really increase your H2 breed back, which is the tough one. Right now we had it at 80. Let's just say it goes to 90. So make that change to 90 and 95 there. And also your wean percent, that should go up at least to 90.
Okay.
Now, so a couple things. Feeding those heifers a little bit early on to get them up to body weight so that they're cycling and then they actually breed when they're supposed to. Trying to breed at 2, to breed to calve at 2 is a little bit of a push. So, a little bit of help, but your heifers are going to breed back a lot better. Second thing is to breed them early. Breed those H1s about a month before the rest of your cattle.
Okay.
What that does, it makes a huge difference in those H2s breeding back. Because after they calve, those cows they're growing. Now they're lactating. They got to clean, they got to cycle, and they got to conceive in 82 days. If you can give them a 30-day head start, that makes a huge difference. So then they breed on time, okay, that's second breeding, and then generally they stay on time. But if they get late early on, it's really hard to bring them back. And also, a lot of them are going to be open like you're seeing right here. They just aren't going to do it in time. They're not going to do it within your breeding season. So simply feeding a little bit more and breeding them earlier is going to make a huge difference in the breed back, your pregnancy percentage in your H2s, the pregnancy percentage in your H1s, and also your wean percent should be much higher. If that's true, those cows, those H2s losing that many, that should make a big difference. Just put that up to 90%, right? Just that alone. And then go to direct costs. The cost to feed corn at 2 pounds a day for 6 months is like right now, New Mexico corn prices, that's $35 a head. If you were to feed alfalfa at 4 pounds, $83 a head. Or if you fed it at 3 pounds, that's like $62 a head. So definitely under $100 a head. But let's say you spent $100 a head. Okay, we're going to be pessimistic. Detailed cattle inventory. The H1s, you got 34. Okay, so 34 times 100, that's $3,400. Now that's divided by 156. So change that to 192. So all you did was you fed them a little bit, you bred them a little bit earlier. It'll change those numbers at least as much as we said right there. Now you're going to see the change in your herd numbers. They're going to skyrocket because you're keeping way more of your replacement heifers. But now look at your herd numbers. Now they're growing just because you did that. So because of that, go ahead and adjust the replacements that are kept from 81%. Let's just go to 50% right now and see what that does. Okay, so maybe 60%. So that's 156 to 149. Let's do 51%.
Yeah. Find that perfect balance. There you go.
156 to 152. So it's about that, about 61%. Again, those are kind of, all those reproductive numbers are fairly low. So we're having to keep a lot of replacements. But now let's look at our profit and loss. Now it's 165,000.
Okay.
120. Again, still with those kind of pessimistic inflation and market numbers. I think the initial profit was 132. So that's a 25% increase in profit, even with kind of doubling the potential costs. That's an increase in profit of 33,000 a year. What else did you want to look at? Virtual fence, right?
Well, yes, I made some phone calls and I got some numbers back on that. Pretty substantial investment to go ahead and get into something like that.
Yeah. How much, you think?
One place you bought it straight out, it was $250 per head for the collars and stuff, plus the monthly charges for the cellular. The other one was a little bit cheaper, but you had to still buy the substation from them. So it kind of come out about close to even.
How you would do that, if it's a per animal cost like the collar,
Right.
that would be entered in the direct cost. You would adjust your direct costs accordingly. Okay?
Right.
The direct cash cost. If you're having to buy the base stations, that would be a capital purchase.
Okay.
What that was and how long that might last, because if you're having to buy the collars, they don't last forever. They last a few years.
Right.
Or the base station, whatever that might be, you would enter in capital purchases. It would include all of that in the whole mix.
Okay.
And how it's going to affect your cash flow and everything. Let's just say the annual collar cost is, say, $60. So you'd increase the direct cash costs per animal by $60. And then also you're going to have some base station that's going to be in capital purchases. So let's just say like $20,000 to $30,000 or something.
Yes, sir.
Let's just say $25,000. I don't know how long those base stations last.
I think they said 10 years.
Okay, put 10 years. And the salvage value, I don't know if they're worth much at the end of that.
I think it kind of zeroes out at the end of this.
But now here's another assumption. How is that going to help you, right? How
Right.
much is it going to increase your carrying capacity? So let's look at the grazing demands right now. So right now you're using 1,376. Let's say it was to increase your carrying capacity by 20%. I don't know what it would be in your situation. It's going to vary from place to place on what you're doing a lot. But I think that's a fairly optimistic number.
Okay.
20% times 1,376 times 1.2 equals 275. Okay. And then go to enterprise efficiency for cattle. It's $72.19. So it's going to increase the profitability of the ranch almost $20,000, $19,852, as you could increase your carrying capacity
Okay.
for the life of that. You would either increase your percent retained, or you might just buy cattle to make up that difference.
Okay.
You could buy mature cows or what have you, but that difference, it's going to be about $20,000 per year if those numbers are accurate. Okay.
So it's definitely something to look at if the cost is high, but the return is
pretty high if it's 20%. And that's going to vary a lot from place to place.
Right.
A lot of places it might be 10% or lower. So now you're talking 10,000 a year, right?
right.
Also, I wanted to ask you, what kind of cattle do you run? Are they Angus or what?
Yes, sir. They're Angus cattle. Yes, sir. And that's another thing too. I got thinking about it. I've actually got 10 head of registered Angus cows that we purchased, and we're going to try to raise our own bulls. I mean, that's another enterprise in itself.
Oh yeah, you could plug that in there as well.
But we're running pretty much as commercial cattle.
Angus cows, Angus bulls.
Yes, sir. When we go to town, we seem to get a better price when we have them all blacks versus anything else. Just our area seems to draw a better price.
Yeah. Well, there's more than one way to have black cattle, and especially since it's like generally dominant too. Crossing with a Hereford, you got a black. We
love them black baldies. They do fantastic out in our country.
Well, and see, that's the thing is hybrid vigor, and you lose a lot of that when you continue to maintain that same breed. A lot of my producers, had black bulls for a couple decades now, right?
Yes.
You lose that hybrid vigor, and that's a big deal. Yeah, crossing with Hereford, you're going to have a black baldy. There's also black Gelbies. There's also black Limousine.
Yes.
So if you can get a mix, then you get the benefits of hybrid vigor. You can keep your cattle black.
Yes,
well, right? Especially you're down in New Mexico and, just heat tolerant. That might help a lot. So, for example, because the cost of doing that isn't anything really, right? I mean, you just buy a different breed of bull. The weaning weights on crossbred calves are going to go up 4%.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your heifer calves are 500 pounds right now. Let's just make that change. So 500 to 520. Steer calves, that would be up to 572. Also, your reproductive numbers are going to be better.
Okay.
Your pregnancy percent generally is going to go up in those crossbred cows, 2 to 3%. Your wean percent is also going to go up like 2 to 3%. And also the survivability of those cows, they're going to last in the herd longer generally. Okay. So you can drop your calling rates. So let's just drop that call percent by a couple percent from 11 to 9. So H2s go 92. And then on your mature cows, we had 93% for the mature cows.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good number. I I would just leave that there. The wean percent should go up for sure. 93% is low. So say 95. So now see how your herd numbers are growing again, right?
Yes.
Because your reproductive numbers are better. So now you can drop your retained heifer percent. Let's go to 55 and see what that does. Okay, so let's drop it a little more. So 52.
There we go.
Okay, so about 52%. Now let's look at our profit and loss. So now you're at almost
Yes.
176,000. That's a $41,000 increase in profit. That's a 31% increase in profit. What's year 5 now? 129. That's a 40% increase in profit. We're kind of messing around. We're having pessimistic outlook that the cattle market's dropping, that the inflation is going to be high, right? And you're still able to make an increase in profit of 40% by year 5, 30% in year 1, 40% by year 5. We're kind of scratching the surface. There's a lot of room to improve where you're at right now.
Yes, sir.
But you can see how you can do it. We're not going to look at everything, but just a few different things, right? We're talking about maybe feeding up those heifers a little bit. We're talking a couple pounds a day.
Right.
We're talking about breeding those heifers a little bit earlier. We're talking about crossbreeding system, right? Just a little genetic variability. We're talking about increasing that thin cow feeding program that you're doing. And right now you're operating it from January to April, right? But there's nothing to say that you couldn't at the end of April, buy another group, right?
Right.
After that, buy another group. So you could do that 3 times a year if you're leaving them for 4 months. Okay, as long as you can move them, that's going to be the key.
Right.
You can sell them, but if you can do that, there's a lot of potential. Let's just say you do that 3 times during the year, right?
Yes, sir.
Head 3 times, so that's 60 head. Go ahead and purchase acquired stockers. Basically, what we ought to do, if we have a little more time, is that would be acquired stalker 1, and then from January to April, and then from April to August is acquired stalker 2, and then August to December, that's acquired stalker 3. But for now, we'll just put them all in the same pot. So now look at the profit. So now that's 248.
Wow, that's a big jump there.
248. That is a 270% increase in profit in year 1.
Yes, sir.
Because you have a feedlot, you have the ability. So this, right, is an additional enterprise. It's an additional profit center for your ranch that can make a huge difference. So that's $248,000. And then look at year 5. That's 167. Whereas before we started at 92.
Right.
Okay. You have some things to things you can think about. But yeah, 269% increase in profit. And that's all very doable. Again, those are fairly, we're talking pessimistic, conservative numbers.
Right.
But this allows you to see it, right? And then to go, okay, well, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And then you play with it. Instantly you get information back and you say, well, that doesn't work. This does work,
Right.
You simply enter your numbers in here, and then it'll say, well, if you can do that, then this is how it would look. And this will or will not be profitable.
I'm excited watching these numbers. Like I said, I always try to do things on the lower end on stuff. And if you do that, you'll come out at the end. And that's all the way I've been running the business. I want to figure a way so we can keep on going in the business 50 years from now. This is not just 5 years down the road. This is a 50-year type deal. The end result is passing on to the next generation. Let them be able to go ahead and keep things going. What I like about this is, like, you think you've got numbers down, but this actually gives them to you a little more solid than, because you can scratch stuff off on a piece of paper and it's like, this is what it is today, but what's it going to be like 5 years down the road? This gives you some ability to sit and play and tweak some numbers and say, okay, these are tiny, tiny tweaks, but this is the effect of that tweak. And I like that.